it's because my respiratory system is functional. All right? Okay, so the fourth one is the sense of smell, just smelling, okay? Yeah, it's also falling under the respiratory system. All right, so we know that the nasal cavity has a surface which is lined by, the olfactory cells. These are the cells that are responsible for picking up smells, okay? Yeah, so that's another function of the respiratory system, okay? Then the fifth one, but definitely not the last, the fifth one is for protection. Earlier on, I said that when we breathe in, the air that we breathe in doesn't directly go to the lungs the way it is. It has to be filtered. It has to, for lack of a better term, purified in a way before it reaches, because it contains a lot of things like dust, sand, a lot of many other things, okay? So along the way, before it reaches the lungs or where the gaseous exchange takes place, it has to be filtered. And once it's filtered, then it's ready to enter our bloodstream, okay? So it's for protection. Sometimes our respiratory system is able to trap bacteria and many other things, okay? That might be harmful if we had to breathe them in the way it is. All right? Okay. So just to emphasize the point, there is a picture of the respiratory system there. Okay, so the system starts from your nostrils. Other schools of thoughts have included the mouth as well. Okay, so it starts from the nostrils all the way up to the lungs. I'm sure you're able to see that. Okay, so don't worry about the various parts. We'll be able to explain this later on as we go on to explain the various diseases of the respiratory system. Okay, yeah, but for today I just want to give you a basic understanding and the structure of the respiratory system. So basically that's how it is. So we have the nostrils there, we have the pharynx, the larynx. You don't have to remember the names, don't bother about that. The trachea, or the windpipe, as they call it. Then we have the bronchus, the left and the right. Okay? Yeah, all that is part of the windpipe. Okay, so we have the larger windpipes, which is the trachea, and the smaller ones, the bronchioles, and the bronchus and the bronchioles, the smaller ones. Okay? So all those things are very important in maintaining the oxygenation, in making sure that we are able to breathe properly. Amen. Then we have the larger structure of the lung. Obviously, the lung is also made up of very small parts called the alveoli, where the gaseous exchange takes place. The gas or the air or oxygen does not really get to the blood. They don't mix really, but it gets so close to the blood such that it is able to diffuse into the bloodstream. But there is no direct contact, okay? Yeah, and then we've seen that part of the, previously, the previous picture showed ribs around the lung. That's just for protection, like the rib cage. It protects the lungs, okay? Yeah, so that's what. And then you also have the diaphragm. That's the muscle that's underneath the two lungs. It's very important in respiration. If that muscle is not contracting, it's very difficult to breathe. So they say it contributes to about 80% of our respiration. So if that muscle becomes paralyzed, then you and I can't breathe, unfortunately. All right, so that's the basic structure of our respiratory system, okay, and their function. Okay, so we all know that when you breathe in, the chest expands, the lungs expand, and everything expands. And then when we breathe out, they contract. Okay, that's basically respiration. It's breathing in and out. As simple as that. All right. Okay. Okay. So having run you through the the anatomy of the respiratory system. Sorry, let me be quick also to mention that the respiratory, the windpipe is made up of cartilage and smooth muscles, okay? Media team, could you just take me back to the picture? It's made up of smooth muscles and cartilage. So as we go on, we'll learn that this is very important in the protection of the airway, okay? So the airway cannot collapse because there is cartilage, all right? And then the airway is able to contract and to constrict because of the muscle, okay? The same way muscles work. They can constrict, then they can expand. So there are certain diseases that come about as a result of the respiratory system or the muscles of the respiratory system failing to contract and to constrict and to expand, all right? Okay, as we are going to see right now. So right now I want to talk about one of the most common diseases of the respiratory system quickly, okay? And that is asthma, all right? I'm sure every one of you have heard about asthma. Yeah. Either we have a family member who has asthma, or you have a neighbor who has asthma, or maybe you have it, or you've just heard of it somewhere. Yeah, okay? So asthma is a very common disease, okay? Statistics say that by the year 2025, it is expected that we may likely have about 400 million people suffering from asthma worldwide. And that's a very huge number, okay? And we cannot just ignore it. So we need to know what asthma is and how to manage it and how to identify it. Amen? All right. So what is asthma? Okay? So I actually put very simple definition. I don't have to bother you with medical terms, but I need to, we need to know it, in very simpler terms. So the simple definition of asthma is a common lung condition that causes occasional breathing difficulties. As simple as that, all right? Obviously, if you know someone who has asthma, if you have a relative or if you have asthma, you agree with me that when they have that asthmatic attack, they'll be having difficulties in breathing. That's the most common presentation of asthma. A cough will come here and there, but not as common as having difficulties breathing, or they call it wheezing, like whistling, that whistling sound as someone is struggling to breathe. Okay? All right. So that's the definition. It is as simple as that. A common condition that causes occasional difficulties in breathing. And it affects all ages, from children and, the elderly, everyone. Okay? And sometimes you might not see it. Many times you might see it from childhood, but sometimes someone may not have it in childhood. It may just manifest in their adulthood. It's very possible, okay? And I should also be quick to mention that there is no cure for asthma, but it can be controlled, all right? The symptoms can be managed, okay? Yeah, so that's that about asthma. But then, how does it come about? All right? So there are different schools of thoughts about how asthma comes about. First of all, asthma is very common in people who have allergies. Okay? So others even call it's some form of an allergic reaction. Okay? Because it's just the inflammation of the cells of the windpipes or the airway. All right? So what actually happens is that, you remember the picture I showed you? Maybe I can take you back to the picture of the lungs and the bronchioles and all that. Okay. So what happens is that for those people who have allergies, okay, those people who have allergies, when you have an asthmatic attack, the triggers, there are a number of triggers. It could be dust, it could be a strong perfume, it could be anxiety. I've seen one person who, after laughing so much, they ended up with an asthmatic attack. So it's there are so many triggers. There are so many triggers. So what happens is that the the cells of your immune system, overreact, to a trigger. Okay, there's what they call hyperactivity. They become hyperactive. So when they become hyperactive, these muscles that you see, the red stuff here, become swollen. So when they become swollen, they narrow the airway, so it becomes smaller. Okay, so when it becomes smaller, it also the muscles also release. They have goblet cells that releases mucus, some very light mucus in the lungs. Then they release mucus, which clogs these airways and blocks them. So when it gets blocked, one will start having difficulties breathing. So that's how the difficulties in breathing comes about, actually. So when they are narrowed and they are impacted with some form of mucus, then you start struggling. Your body will tell you that you need oxygen, but you can't take oxygen in because that space which is supposed to be occupied by the air, the oxygen, is already occupied by the mucus which has been released by the lungs, and the airways or the pipes have narrowed. They've become smaller. They are not the usual size. So you keep struggling. So that sound that comes as you are struggling is what is called wheezing. Okay, that's the main symptom that you see in people who are asthmatic. I'm sure you've seen that before. Yeah. So that's how it comes about. All right. So that's why I said it will be very important for us to understand the structure of the respiratory system, the lungs and the windpipes and everything, for us to understand how some of these diseases come about. Okay? So that's what happens. That happens. Then there's another, this is the scientific part, but there's another theory. The other theory is that during childhood, if you haven't been exposed to certain pathogens or to certain things, then in your adulthood, you struggle with these things. Okay? Like they say that if you've been exposed to certain infections of the respiratory system, then your immune system will not be naive enough not to fight those things. Okay? I watched a science documentary of a person who they deliberately get snake venom and inject themselves because they want to they want to sensitize their immune system so that in an event that they get bitten by such a snake, they won't die. Yeah, it's unimaginable, but it kind of works sometimes. It does work because some of these things that when you it's the same concept with immunization. Okay, so when you take a child for immunization, you're actually introducing that disease, but you've made it in such a way that it won't affect them, but the immune response, the body will know that, okay, this is polio, and when polio comes, this is how we are going to react. Okay? But that thing they're introducing in the body is not going to do anything to the body. Okay? And some of them are just manufactured in such a way that they mimic the structure of the very virus or the bacteria, okay? But they can't affect the child. So that's a concept of immunization in a nutshell, okay? So when you expose your immune system or your body to certain things, then the body will know that, obviously, when such an attack comes, this is how we're going to fight, It's like when you're walking barefooted, you know that, okay, if there are thorns here, I won't pass. Last time I passed here, they did something to me. Okay, so now you know you can't do it. All right? So even in asthma, there's a certain theory that says those people who are not exposed to certain things, they are likely going to have it because their body doesn't know how to deal with it. Okay? And then there are other theories that are contradicting that says that because of too much exposure to a certain pathogen, then you are likely to have it. Okay? So I don't want to bother you with that, but all I wanted to tell you is that how it comes is when the body overreacts, okay? Overreacts to certain pathogens, okay? To certain triggers like pollen, dust, mice, strong perfumes, and many other things. All right? Okay. So that's basically what happens. So what are the other symptoms? I talked about the wheezing, difficulties in breathing, laboring to breathe, that whistling sound, breathlessness, chest tightness is one of the symptoms that we're going to see in a person who has asthma when they have an asthmatic attack. Then when those symptoms temporarily get out of hand, that we cannot control them, that is what we call an asthmatic attack. But then asthmatic attacks are also in various levels, okay? Various levels. There is severe attack, there is mild, there is moderate, and many others. And how we manage them is according to the level of severity, okay? But the principles are the same, okay? The principles are the same. So how do we manage asthma, okay? So asthma obviously is managed by a group of drugs that are called beta agonists. These are drugs that act on the smooth muscles of the respiratory system. They make them relax so that they can expand. Okay? So earlier on we learned that when a trigger comes, your body reacts. Then they narrow the airways, okay? They narrow them. So now when you get this beta agonist or salbutamol, this is a commonest one, salbutamol, or those inhalers that we use, what they will do is that they will expand the airways. They expand the airways, and then they'll also make that mucus lighter so you can cough it out, okay? So once the airway expands and you can cough out the mucus, you will have dealt with an asthmatic attack. The good thing about asthmatic attacks is that those reactions are reversible, okay? So the same way you had an inflammation of the lungs and the bronchioles and everything, the reaction, having taken medication, the reaction can be reversed and you can get back to normal, all right? Okay, so there are two different types of inhalers that we use in the management of asthma. So there are those inhalers that we use when you are in an attack, so they contain the medication that acts as quickly as possible, okay? And then there are the inhalers that have the medication that we use for prevention. We call them long-acting because you do 2 puffs every day, and then it will work throughout the 24 hours, okay? They are long-acting. And when you feel like you're having an attack, there is another different one that we use, the short-acting one. They will act very fast and they relieve you of your symptoms, okay? And then some of them, obviously you've noticed that there are some who have tablets called Ventolin. Yeah, it's the same drug but just in tablet form, okay? It's basically the same drug but just in tablet form. All right, so how long does asthma last? Earlier on, I said that there is no cure, but the good thing is that it can be called to deal with it. If it manifests in your childhood,